Okay, welcome back to class. A couple of months late, and I've already recorded this, but only when I recorded it I realized I had all the setups wrong. So I'm going to quickly redo this because I got another class to teach in about an hour or so. I still haven't had breakfast. Today, very quickly or not, we're going to look at how to improve if conditions. How to take something we know and make it a little more sophisticated. And we're going to do that with the help of three auxiliaries or three tools. Should, which we're going to use in the first condition. Were, which we're going to use in the second condition. And yes, you guessed it, had, we're going to use in our third condition. Let's look at this in simple context. Let's use one simple idea. If I study, I will pass the test. Okay, so in this case we have our first condition. And the one thing we know about the simple present is that the simple present represents the future. Yes, as insane as that sounds, what is true today is true next week, it's true next month, and it's true until it's no longer true. The present simple is a future prediction tool. When I say I live in city, then you know that I live in that city until a time where I say I don't live in that city. If I say I live in Sao Paulo, you know that's true today, but principally it's true tomorrow, next week, next month, and the month after. When I say our class starts at 5 p.m., that's not about now, that's about 5 p.m. today, or it's about 5 p.m. next week. When I say our class is on Fridays, that's not about today, that's about next Friday, the Friday after, and the Friday after that. The simple present with no auxiliaries allows us to predict the future with no emotions at all. And the emotions come when we start saying, I have to, I had better, I should, I can't, I get to. All of these reflect how we feel about the idea of the future in the present. But the simple present is just the simple present. So let's look then at our second condition. If I studied, I would pass the test. So there, our verb goes one step backwards to the simple past, and of course, our outcome will pass becomes would pass. And our third condition is, if I had studied, I would have passed the test. In this case, my verb in the condition goes from the simple past to the past perfect. The past perfect is just the past of the past. There's no more further back. These are from simple to past perfect. And here we have, of course, would, which is our theoretical kind of auxiliary, with the present perfect creates that tool. Okay, so let's just look at visualize. There's two ways we can look at grammar. There's a way that we're imagining what it allows us to think, and then there's a structure. So if I look at that, when we're thinking, well, this thing here, if I study, I said the simple present represents the future. It allows us to make predictions of the future. So our first condition in our thoughts is here. Our second condition is always about right now. Like if I had $1 million, I would buy 1,000,000 kushingas. It's always about what would you do right now? So if I studied, I would pass the test. So this is like a theoretical about doing an action right now. The first condition is about an action tomorrow. The third condition is about what we call hindsight. So if I had studied because I didn't, I would have passed the test because I didn't. So we're looking into the past and we're having this remorse and regret. Grammar-wise, it's a little different. So grammar-wise, even though we're thinking about the future, our verb is in the present. The verb is here right now. In the second condition, even though we're thinking about the present, so we're thinking about the present, our verb is actually in the simple past, if I studied. And the third, we are in the past perfect, which is the past of the past. So if I had studied, I would have passed. But once again, we're using that grammar structure to represent the simple past. If I had studied, I would have passed the test. All right, so how do we make these more sophisticated than they already are? Well, what we want to do today, very quickly, because I still want to have breakfast, is get rid of this if. So in the first case, I'm going to use this auxiliary should. And I'm going to say, should I study, I will pass the test. And you'll say, but Kian, why? And I say, because it is. So this is just a trick we're learning, a tool we're learning, a way to make it a little more sophisticated, give it a little more pizzazz. So we could look at if you don't want emails, if you want emails, we'll do it in affirmative first. Tick the box. Something simple, right? So again, we want to get rid of this if here. And to do that, we need to use our nice little auxiliary here, should. We're not creating a question, we're just doing a little bit of magic here. Should you want emails? Tick the box. What about if it's gossip, another person? So if he doesn't want emails, get him to tick the box. All right, so same thing. So we'll go should, he, and now instead of doesn't want, we're going to say not want. Emails, get him to tick the box. Or in the affirmative, should he want emails, get him to tick the box. That's it. So the negative, should he not want, that's doesn't want, or should he want. If the weather is nice, we'll go to the park. Beautiful. So in this case, again, we want to get rid of this if condition. How do we do that? Well, we do that with our auxiliary here, should. Should the weather. And now we can't use verb is. I have to turn it into the base form. Should the weather be nice, we'll go to the park. That's it. That's our first condition. And so we use should as a way to make it a little more sophisticated. So we use should, we have our auxiliary, our subject, then our verb, and in this case as well, we also have an object. Normally we know when we use an auxiliary, for example, any of these auxiliaries, can, should, will, usually it's a yes-no question. Should I go to the beach? Should I study? Should I buy a car? Can I go to the beach? Can I buy a car? Can I borrow your car? Do you like jazz? Do you like Mastodon? Are you a doctor? Normally when we start with this like A, B, C, D, it's always a yes-no question. In this context, no. We're using this auxiliary just to neaten this up. So let's look at our next one. The next one we're going to look at the word were. That's going to be our auxiliary to make this a little neater and to solve this problem. So we're going to say instead of if I studied, I would pass the test. Were I to study, I would pass the test. Or we can say if I had $1 million, I would buy 1,000,000 kushingas. All right, so in this case, again, we want to get rid of this if here, and we're going to say were I. Now this verb has to be in the base form. It doesn't have to be in the past. Why? Because our auxiliary is telling us it's the past. Here, our auxiliary is telling us it's in the present. Here, our auxiliary is already telling us that this is happening in the past. So, were I to have $1 million, I would buy 1,000,000 kushingas. I know right now your instinct is to say, but why? Explain this to me. No, we don't need to explain it. Not right now. Let's just look at what we're doing. Let's just look at the tool we're doing and repeat it over and over and over and over. And when you know how to use it, there's a difference between knowing how to use it and knowing what it means. It's more important to know how to use it than it is to know what it means. When you learn grammar as a child, you started learning grammar when you were 11, but you were already fluent. By that time, you knew how to express yourself in the present, future, past, past perfect, future perfect, everything. Only when you were an expert at language did you decide to unpack it and understand what you're saying and then how to improve on it. But what's important is that we learn to play with the ball before we learn the rules to the game. If you're teaching a child a sport, you don't want to teach the rules first. You want to teach the rules in context as they're needed. So the rules are slowly being added to the game as the children are playing it, and they understand the rules in context. The same thing as most vocabulary that you have, that I have as a writer, as a teacher. There are many words I use in my writing, in my fiction, that I don't know what they mean on their own. There are many words that I say to my students, and my student says, "What does that word mean?" I say, "Okay, well, let's go look it up, because I don't know." Because we learn words in context. We learn it from literature that we've read, from fiction, from academic articles, from documentaries we watch, from lectures that we watch, from conversations with friends, family, from conversations with my students. We absorb language subliminally. We absorb language in context. And then when we experience that context, our brain uses a language without us even knowing. So everything we have, like in our vernacular, is learned without understanding why. It's just adopted, it's absorbed, it's copied, and then it's used. So here, let's look at the same thing. Let's look at when you want to know why, what does this mean? That's this resistance, right? This is your fear disguising itself as intellectuality. But let's just name it for what it is. It's fear, right? So we can resist and say, I don't know what this is. Or we can say, okay, I don't know what it is, but I'm still going to play with it. I don't give a fuck. Like, I can not know what something is, and I can still play with it. I have no idea what the fuck life is about. But every day I wake up and have fun. And in an existential way, I'm defining the meaning as I'm living life. Same thing with grammar. If you don't know what it is, accept that. Say, I don't know what it is, but that's okay. And then now go back to playing with the grammar and playing with the sentences. It's okay to not know what it is. What's good is if at the end of it, you say, well, was I scared? No. Did I learn anything? I don't think so. All right, well then next time, how do you feel? Well, not scared at all, and it was a lot easier to play with it. Did you learn it? I think so. I think I'm getting there. And then the third, fourth, fifth time you play with the grammar, eventually you go, oh, now I get it. You only get it because you threw down your defenses and you allowed yourself to play with the grammar and play with the structure. As adults, we like to pretend we're smart, but we're not. Children absorb, learn, and evolve. We as adults, we cement ourselves, we bury ourselves into this kind of rigid state, and then we try to pretend. You know, we build this wall, this rigid wall. We call it intellect. Say, prove to me. I want to know every single way that I use this before I play with it once. No, be like a child. So in this case, all we're doing, we're just using this auxiliary to make it a little nicer. If I lived in New York, I would get published. All right, so let's look at something that's absolutely not true. Here is me telling you that the only reason I don't have a large publishing contract with a fantastic publishing house is because I don't live in New York. Has nothing to do with that I'm a shit writer. Nothing to do with that at all. It's all about where I live. That makes it easier for me to sleep at night, or not. So we'll say here, what? We're just going to apply the same thing. We want to get rid of the if, there, and then we're just going to use WeIRD to do that. So we start with our auxiliary, that's it. We start here, so then what do? We go auxiliary to the subject to the verb. But the verb is always going to be to live, to have, to want, to need, to buy, to see, to drink, all of it. And that's it, in New York. Ba, 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 ba. That's easy. We'll say, well, okay, why don't you move to New York? Well, I got kids. I love my kids. My kids are fantastic. So if I didn't have kids, I would move to New York. Okay, again, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of this if. We don't like the if. We want to make it a little more sophisticated. We want to put some lapels on that sentence. So we start with were, because it's the past and it's the second condition, and that's how we solve this problem. Were, and then we go to the rest of the sentence. Were I, and then it'll be to not have, because that's a negative verb, right? This did not is not have. It's not, the didn't it sounds better when we connect the negative to the auxiliary, but actually auxiliars just represent time. There's no such thing as a negative auxiliary. They just represent time. That's all they do. So in this case, were I not to have, whoops, I can't. Were I not to have, because it's the negative and then it's the verb itself. My apologies, I fucked that up. Were I not to have kids, I would move to New York. Now, more than anything, this is a terrible sentence because I love my kids and they're listening in their kitchen. They're really hoping I go somewhere with this. Yeah, it's a shitty sentence because this is the whole reason people play lottery, this type of grammar structure. This is what you call wishful thinking. In some perfect scenario, you have the perfect outcome. This is the whole reason people play lottery. It's the reason people give away the last of their cents to greedy churches who really don't care about improving people's lives in the present. They just want to get that money and pave those streets in Rome with gold. The same thing with lottery. It's selling wishful thinking, selling the dream of escape. It's a beautiful feeling, it is, but when you come back to reality, it's a crushing blow. If I say, were I to have $1 million, I would buy 1 million Kushinyas. Well, how do I feel when I come back to reality when I only have 2 Kushinyas? Not very good, do you? You start to resent your 2 shitty Kushinyas now. So it's a terrible grammar structure. Only because we use it traditionally for this wishful thinking instead of like problem solving. For example, were we to use this camera, we could solve this problem, type of thing. But either way, we're not here for that. We've done that in another video. So all we're doing is, to get rid of the if, we're using were. If I were you, I would prepare my classes better. All right, so in here, this one's easier, right? All we're doing is just moving that here. Boom, that's it. Were I you, I would prepare my videos better. And so, why as well are we using this were? Well, in this case, when we look at if conditions, we break grammar rules everywhere. If I were there, if you were here, if she were here, if it were here, if they were here. Already in if conditions, we break grammar rules. We create a new rule to solve a problem. So already we have that here with our verb. It's not if I was there, it's if I were there, if you were there, if she were there, if he were there. Already here and here, we destroy that grammar rule. No, not there. Well, for I, she, and it, and he, we destroy the grammar rule. So the rules are necessary in certain environments, or the structure changes. So that's all that we're doing here is, were I you, I would prefer it. Were you here, were she here, were it here, were they here, were I here. Beautiful. All right, so let's look at the last one we have here. The last one we're going to use had. And this is going to be easier than any of them, because all I'm going to do is this. That's it. Done. Had I studied, I would have passed the test. If I had seen you, I would have said hello. So, what do we do? Easy. Had I seen you, I would have said hello. So in this case, I'm just moving the auxiliary. We need an auxiliary in each one of these to do it. We need something in front of the subject. The first one we had should, the second one we have were, and the third condition we have had. That easy. So I can say if I, so let's look at that scenario where I say that were I to not have kids, were I not to have kids, I would move to New York. So yeah, we said that was a shitty sentence, and it is. Well, let's look at a little bit of gratitude. We say, if I hadn't had kids, and this is what my kids are in the kitchen waiting for me to say, if I hadn't had kids, I wouldn't have started writing. My kids are the reason that I write. They're the reason I wrote my first novel. They're the reason that I'm writing my 24th novel. I only write because of my kids. They are my inspiration, my drive, my everything, my determination, my resilience, all of those nouns that make me sound like a good father. So in this case, we have, let's break it up here, just so we can see what we're going to do. And all we're going to do is this. Boom, that's it. Had I not had kids, I wouldn't have started, writing. That's it. Had I not had kids, I wouldn't have started writing. If I hadn't finished, or if I hadn't arrived on time, I would have missed my flight. All right, same thing. Had I not arrived on time, I would have missed my flight. My flight. And so this auxiliary here, only in the if condition. Once again, this is important. The if conditions, we're doing so much of these structural changes with the if condition. Instantly, by getting rid of this if, we give ourselves a little more class and sophistication on that structure. So let's close up here, because I've recorded this class now 3 times, and like I said, I need to go have some breakfast. So if I study becomes should I study. If I studied becomes what? Kids at home, were I to study. If I had studied, this becomes had I studied. That's it. That easy. So we're using 3 auxiliaries. In the first condition, should. Should you want? Should you leave? Should you have? In the second condition, were you to study? Were you to have? Were you to drink? Were you to buy? Were you to see? In the third condition, had I studied? Had I seen? Had I known? Had you known? Had he known? Had they known? That's it. That's simple. Practice this over and over and over and over 1,000 times. And after you practice it 1,000 times, then ask yourself, what am I saying and why am I saying it? But be brilliant at it first before you start to deconstruct it. Don't let your fear disguise itself as intelligence, because it's not. Your intellect is a resistance measure. You need to just shut the fuck up and dive the fuck in. That's it. That's the end of today's lesson. I don't know how it worked. I really fucking hope it recorded properly this time. It's been a long time since my last video because, well, I'm focused on I'm working a lot. If you want to have English classes, please contact me. I have students coming to me from these YouTube videos, and I teach students all over the world. I deal with international currencies, and I have students in France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, Portugal, Ireland, Australia, and of course here in Brazil, lots and lots and lots of students. So I do have a couple of vacancies, and I always have vacancies opening and closing. So if you want to have online classes, do a little bit of existential English with me, please give me an email, and we can see what we can do. In the meantime too, I'm also a writer. And let me see if I have iTunes. I also write fiction, and if you're looking for something to improve your language, nothing is better than fiction. Stop reading self-help nonsense. It's terrible writing, it's horrible analogies, and it's sugar on your lips. Terrible. I can't say anything's worse about self-help and this weird culture of toxic positivity and toxic inspiration at the moment. I can't wait until we get back to apathy. The 90s was my favorite era. So here is, if you're looking for something to read, fiction is always the best because you will discover vocabulary, but there will be a wonderful visual story that you get to follow. As writers, we're, especially fiction writers, we're a lot better at filling that teatro, the theater of your mind, with characters and sets. that makes you learn in context and have fun. This novel here is one of the last full novels that I released in 2021, Christmas 2021. It's a collection of Zen existential fairy tales, so the language is very simple, almost like childlike language. It's very simple structure, A, B, C, D, like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. So this makes it really easy to follow, to learn, to engage, and to learn. And of course, the philosophy is existential and sometimes quite darkly humored, huma ácido, and a lot of very funny satire in there as well. So these are 30 stories which, if you're an intermediate to advanced student, will be really good for you to practice your learning, and great new vocabulary as well, but really simple to follow, really simple structure. And of course, it's free because I have no sense of self-value or self-worth, and I'm trying to deal with this over time. In fact, this book here is very popular in Lithuania and Estonia. So take that, ex-Soviet Union. That's it. We'll leave it there. As always, love the people that love you. Everybody else is just a piece of shit. I will see you when I see you because, as I said, I'm too busy teaching, writing my new novel, spending as much time as I can with my kids because I love them to fucking death, training, running, meditating, trying to learn how to stand on my head properly at yoga, fighting, and a whole bunch of things. And I haven't had time to make classes because I just haven't had time. But I'll try to do one, maybe at least every couple of months. So that's this one. So I guess I'll see you in the next video.